The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this episode are that of the guest and host and do not necessarily reflect the values of sponsors or other associated organizations. Welcome to the Parental Compass, presented by Family Education and Support Services. I am your host, Bobby Williams. If you like what you're hearing today, I encourage you to please subscribe to us on Apple and Spotify. That way you'll get notified every week when we're dropping a new episode. I want to start by giving a big shout out to your friend and mine, Rocco from State Farm. Something most people don't consider enough is life insurance. The idea that if something happens to you, your family will still be taken care of. That's something that Rocco is particularly passionate about, and it's a sense of security that you can just have, knowing that no matter what happens, your family's going to be okay. So I encourage you to check him out. Go to myagentrocco.com or you can give him a call. His number is 360-943-2191. Today we are talking about the power of music. We have a really great guest on the show, Jennifer Herman. Jennifer is a former music teacher and the executive director of the Olympia Symphony Orchestra. We talked about the impact music can have, the community that it can create around young people, and what to do if you're nervous about the song lyrics. So a little bit about me is I lead a nonprofit organization called the Bridge Music Project. We teach songwriting to youth who have had really challenging lives. So that definitely played into our conversation too. Let's check it out.
You have to communicate with others. You have to kind of work as one body. If you're in a large ensemble and you have a conductor, you need to watch while still also being aware of what you're doing. So it's a kind of a multifaceted, multitasking type of activity that then brings in all of your senses. It's physical, it's auditory. You know, there's a lot that goes together in a musical experience. And so, those kind of awareness things are the byproducts that I often see in people. And then there's the well-documented correlation of music to math. You know, there's fractions, there's numerical equivalencies, and they have direct correlations to math.
It's interesting to think about the coordination piece of you have to take what's coming into your ear and translate that to your hands or your voice or all these different things. I remember we were talking before and you told me an interesting story about a bus driver or something. What's that story?
I love this story. So my father-in-law, his name's Trigby, he was an accountant in his career. And in retirement, he decided he wanted to be a bus driver in Issaquah. And he was on the reserve bus driver list. So he would get substitute routes that he was not familiar with, often, in the fog or the rain. And he'd have to just pick up this route and make all the stops. So he's a very social guy and he would like to engage with the kids on the bus. And so he started asking kids, would you like to sit up front with me and maybe tell me when a stop is coming up, just in case I miss it on my route that I've never driven before? And after a number of times doing this, he started to draw his own conclusion about the reactions and helpfulness he would get from some of the children on the bus. Now, not to say that this is 100% like across the board true for every child, but in general, his conclusion was, number one, a lot of kids didn't want to help him. They wanted to get back and sit with their kids and sit with their friends and not necessarily help the old man who needed help at the wheel. But the ones who would respond, oftentimes he realized they were the ones carrying instruments onto the bus. And he thought, oh, this is interesting. Then he realized more often than not, the ones who were aware of the bus stops coming up that were not their own, but just they knew they had, even if they had been in conversations with their friends before or playing games on the bus, there was a part of them that was still picking up on what was going on in their environment. Those were also the kids that were carrying instruments. So the conclusion he drew was that, okay, these kids are really helpful. They're really respectful of him. They're really aware, and they were just really kind and nice. Now, not to say that kids not carrying instruments didn't have those traits as well, but he drew this conclusion that, the kids that are participating in music just have this sense about them that's larger than themselves and bigger than their immediate wants or needs.
And I could see the correlation between awareness, like being aware of where your place is and all the music, and that awareness, of just what's going around you in the bus. Yeah. I remember being a kid and just like banging on pans, or I just kind of liked the noise of it too.
Yeah.
Like, I think there's something to like percussion and hitting something that's a lot of fun,
True. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I think back to my own kids doing that. I wish I would have been more tolerant of that, because I think there were plenty of times as a tired mom that I asked them to be quiet. And now looking back, I sort of wish I didn't do that so much and just let them have fun.
But it's like you don't really need any formal training to start singing or start doing something with music.
No. In fact, I think in America, I think we tend to forget that. I think we think, okay, there's a time that you start your music lessons, and you go and do that, and you go to your lesson and you practice. And I'm not discounting the value of that. I'm a music teacher, so I think there's a lot of value in that. But I think we place labels too early on children. People who can play music or can't, or can sing or can't. Other cultures, and I've lived overseas, other cultures, just music is as natural, singing is as natural as breathing. If you can speak, you can sing. Where here we think, you're either a good singer or a bad singer, you need to be trained, you need to take lessons. And yes, I mean, to a certain point, if you want to develop your craft and develop your art, study it and learn better techniques, but everybody can sing. It's just, what do we put that line, or what does can mean? And I think for kids especially, we just want to encourage them all that, yes, they can sing all the time.
Mm-hmm. What about when you get your kids in music lessons? Sometimes learning music can be a difficult thing, like learning math. How do you get your kids to stick with it or stay encouraged through the process and not just quit 3 lessons in?
That's a great question. I'm not sure I have an answer for that. I think balancing study and play. I think once you've started music lessons, it's possible for it to all become study and practice.
Yeah.
And what drew them into it in the first place gets lost. They forgot that they really wanted to just play with music in the first place. So I think not allowing the education of music to replace that initial love of music, to walk hand in hand with it, and to remember that, by learning more about it, you learn to have more fun with it, not just get better at it.
Totally. Yeah, you can expand your experience of playing the more skills you have.
Yeah, the more opportunities open up for you, the more you learn about it.
Do you think music plays into having a big sense of identity for young people?
I do. I think, it's a community, and there's a thread of understanding that flows between people who make music together. It's something you can talk about, that you can talk about what music you enjoy listening to. And then there's a really special relationship that happens between people who are making music together in a band or in an orchestra or in a choir or, in a room with a radio. There's just something really special. So yeah, I think there's valuable social connections. You find your people in music.
Yeah. Well, that was a lot of my experience. Like, I did choir and took piano lessons and different things. But when I really got into music was just when I started rapping and doing shows and performing. And for me, I got like a whole social circle out of it. I got positive attention. It was something to be just like focused in on and into, and just totally like changed my life in a lot of ways. What was your experience like when you were young and doing music?
Oh gosh, a little different than that. So I started piano lessons when I was 3 years old.
Mhm.
Um, but I was living in Japan. So that was actually a very normal age to start music. Here in America, it's not quite that young that kids start. Uh, I really didn't know any different life than somebody who played the piano. And the piano, by its nature, is a little bit of a solitary instrument because you really just practice and play by yourself and then perform on recitals, one person after another until you get to a point where you can play with other people. Um, not like a band or orchestra music where you can have very elementary groups of kids that can all play together. It just doesn't really happen with piano. So it's kind of a lonely thing for a lot of years.
Oh,
And so I didn't experience kind of the fun of being able to make music until I was in college, really, because at that point I started playing with other instruments, and mostly because that was part of my schooling, is learning to accompany a violin soloist or, a clarinet or a saxophone, just playing with other people. And I wasn't good enough to do it until I got then, only because there isn't music really written for people to do it before that. Once I started doing that, my love for music just took off. I always liked it before,
yeah.
but I didn't love it. And I think it's because I didn't do it with other people. And then, my relationship with music took a turn into teaching, which is what I always wanted to do. And I loved being able to instruct others in music and, watching light bulbs turn on when you teach somebody how to read music and they thought they couldn't. So I loved that. I love opening doors to music. But I think the most fun I've ever had in music has been recently with what I do with the Olympia Symphony, because now I'm working with a lot of people and helping them make music together. And I get to see firsthand the joy that comes when people make music together. So I think that's kind of my, the that's the turning point for me of when I really started to love my relationship with music, was when I did it with other people and not just by myself.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk a little bit about teenagers and music because that when you're a teenager, your music can be so important to you. It can be a big part of your identity, how you think about yourself. And sometimes that's concerning for parents, like they don't like the content of the music. Did you ever have like any bands your parents didn't like?
Well, I grew up in a household. My dad is a huge country music fan. So we
Yeah.
had nothing but like old country music in my home growing up. And then when I was a teenager, I loved Wham, my absolute favorite. I loved that. A little different than country music. So of course my dad didn't like it. Um, so there was that.
Yeah.
Uh, um, but I hear what you're saying, that sometimes parents might have like questionable about content, right? So I guess my advice would be, rather than just telling them to turn it off, right? Or that's not allowed in our house, have a conversation about it. Back to what we started talking about, talk about music and ask them what they like about that music, because you may find out that it's not necessarily whatever I don't know, whatever the parent is deeming an acceptable meaning, maybe the words or something that they may not like in the music. That's worth having a conversation about, isn't it? What the content of the lyrics were, and that there may be growth that happens on both the child and the parent's part by having that conversation.
Mhm.
So in that sense, music can open a door to really important topics that should be discussed between a parent and a child. Or you might discover that they didn't even know what the song was saying, but they loved the beat or they loved those instruments, and just something about the groove that just drew them in, and they hadn't even noticed what the words were. And that's a great conversation too.
I remember being young, and it was around the time like Eminem was first coming out, And some of the stuff, I'm maybe 11 or so, and some of the content, I didn't know exactly what he was talking about, but I got that it was dirty somehow. But that was sort of part of the fun of the music too. And eventually my parents just got me like the clean version. And so you still know kind of like, something's up, but I don't know. I'm more of an advocate of like, let kids listen to it. They probably don't even, like, they'll be fine. I don't know.
Yeah, well, and like I said, I mean, if you end up having a conversation about why a parent thinks those words are dirty and shouldn't be in the house, and the kid thinking it's okay, that conversation is a good one to have. Those are probably topics that they would want to address as people who live in a family anyway, and music can open the door to that.
Well, and thinking about it deeper now, it's like music can really affect your worldview a little bit too. Like, what are the ideas that you're putting in your head and feeding to yourself on a loop with your favorite songs? It can be influential, I'm sure.
In good and bad ways. So, there's, yeah.
Yeah. But I think just getting out to like a music scene also and getting to know people that way is just such a valuable thing for young people. And music's a lot more accessible nowadays too. It seems like if you want to record yourself, you can, or you can make beats and someone from across the world can work on your song and things like that.
And we can be exposed to so many more things, right? You're not limited to, whatever you have in your household. You're not limited to what you can reach on your radio. You can listen to anything from around the world. So I think we live in a really exciting time that, the buffet is huge.
Yeah.
What we listen to.
Are your children musicians?
They are. So I have 3 kids, and they all play a little bit of piano, but I was always so tired after work that I never actually taught them piano, which is probably better for them anyway. They just discovered piano on their own and did it their own way without me looking over them. But they also play violin and cello and guitar and drums.
What words of advice would you have for parents where music just seems sort of an intimidating thing? They're not musicians, they're not quite sure how to get their kids involved. What would you say to that parent?
I would say, well, to the adult, I'd say it's not too late. They can learn right alongside their kids. And in fact, it might be really fun to learn music together with your child. As a child, you're used to seeing your parents as the ones who know things and the ones who tell you that the things that you're doing are wrong, or you're not coloring right, or you got, some problems wrong on your math homework, or you need to fix this in your essay, right? Like, the parents tend to know more than the kids. What a fun opportunity to decide you're going to learn from scratch together. And as they're learning music in school and learning how to read notes, you ask them about it and let them teach you. That's fun, right?
I think another way things are more accessible are you can learn a lot from YouTube videos. Like, anything you want to learn, there's YouTube videos about it.
Yeah. So I think, don't let whatever experiences limited you in your childhood to then transfer onto your kids and think, well, I don't know how to do it. I never did it. So, maybe it's not important, because there may be a spark that never got a chance to be lit in that child. So leave it all open, and then try to do it with them. They might enjoy teaching their parents,
Any closing thoughts you want to share with our audience?
I'd like to address you, Bobby, and thank you for the work that you're doing with youth in our community, literally giving them a venue for their voices, like literally in what you do. I admire the work that you do, and I see the difference you're making in the community. And I hope you hear that from your community, the gratitude we have for you and what you're doing for children.
I really appreciate that. Well, thank you so much for being here and taking the time to talk with me.
Thanks, Bobby.
props back to you, Jennifer. Thank you for everything you're doing for the community. That's our show. Big thank you to Family Education and Support Services, my agent Rocco from State Farm. My name is Bobby Williams. We'll see you next week. Peace.